Okay, we're going to randomly purchase some ice cream. In other words, we're going to create a new ice invoice, and in that ice invoice will be some ice details. So we're going to do this automatically, and we'll begin first assuming we're in the root folder, the user's home directory that is. We'll have a /connect/connect, same thing we've seen in other videos, and we'll make that connection. Now, first thing we need to know is how many customers do we have, because we're going to randomly pick one of those customers. So we're going to get a record count on a number of customers. Then we're going to get a record count on the number of different flavors that we have, because we have to choose one flavor. And then we're also going to get a, in this case here, $C is going to be the random number from 1 to the number of customers that there are. And $F is going to be the random number from 1 to the number of flavors that there are. And then customer ID, well, once we know that we want third, fourth, fifth customer, whatever we want, we're going to get the ID of that customer, which is not necessarily the same as $C. So we're going to get the ID of that customer. We're also going to get the ID of the flavor, because again, the ID and the number in order may not necessarily be its ID. And then we're going to random number of quantity from 1 to 3. So it's going to be 1, 2, or 3 is going to be the number of ice creams purchased of that particular flavor. And there's the function called purchase. We send obviously $con, but we send the customer ID, the flavor ID, and the quantity. That's what we're sending to the function called purchase. So there are 3 functions that we need to create: record count, get ID, and purchase. All right, so, there's one more thing. If the number of customers is greater than 0, and those 2 ampersands mean and, both compound conditionals have to be true, number of flavors greater than 0. Obviously, if the number of customers is 0, there's nobody to buy. And if the number of flavors is 0, then there's nothing to buy. So both those have to be greater than 0 in order to do the purchase. Now let's take a look at record count, where we've got just the table as the one parameter, obviously $con. But select count as num from table. You prepare the SQL, you execute it, you store the result, you bind the result, you fetch it, and you return it. Simple. All we're doing is a record count. Get ID. You have table and the num. Now, I just want to point out in ice cream, select ID comma flavor from ice cream. And there's somebody has an ID of 14. That's the red raspberry. I just wanted to point that out. In order to see that, I'd have to do select ID comma flavor from ice cream limit 13, 1. So although it's ID of 14, I'm going to say 13, 1. In other words, the random number has to be 1 less than it generates. So before I do my $SQL equals select ID from table limit $num, 1, I first have to subtract 1 from num. That's $num minus minus. So I prepare that statement, I execute it, I store the result, I bind the result to ID, fetch, and return ID. So all I'm doing is returning the ID number, because over time the ID number is not necessarily going to be the same as things are added and deleted. It's just we need to know the exact ID number. Now, for purchase, I've got 3 things I need: the customer ID, $CID, the flavor ID, $FID, and the quantity, the number of cones purchased. I also need to know the date and the time, because that's something that's in the ICE invoices: customer ID, date, and time. So once I have that, I'm going to insert into ICE invoices the customer ID, the date, the time, values, CID, $D, and $T, and I prepare that, I execute it, and I can close that statement. But here's the deal: I just created a new invoice. So I'm going to do select max ID as max ID from ICE invoices, because I want to know that ID number, the ICE invoice, because I'm going to need it for the ICE details. So I prepare that statement, execute, store the result, bind the result, fetch, and now $SQL2, insert into ICE details. That invoice ID is that same max ID that I just fetched. The flavor ID and the Q were already sent way back at the beginning. So I'm inserting into ICE details on that invoice that particular flavor and that quantity. So I have to prepare SQL2 and I execute it. And there you go. I just purchased a random number of quantity of a particular flavor for a particular customer. Now, to get this to happen every day, I'm going to do Cron tab -E. I'm going to edit the Cron tab. I already have my automated vote in there, but I hit an I for insert. And I go and I'm going to add 3 different sales. So looks like at 30 minutes after 8, 35 minutes after 8, and 45 minutes after 8. So for 3 5-minute periods in a row, it's going to have somebody purchasing an ice cream at random. We don't know who. Though if we look at it today, we see that customer ID 2, somebody whose last name is Howard, had an invoice number 67 where he bought 1 vanilla. Glenson bought 2 chocolates a little while later, and DiMaggio bought 3 vanillas. So